Today, I show you how to make this. It's a linear bearing used for 3D printing on the X or Y axis for an 8mm rod. Stay tuned, I'll show you how to make the whole thing. It's kind of a long video this time, but it's worth it. And today I'm going to be showing how to make a linear bearing for a 3D printer. Just basic model for a bearing that has 6 different round bearings to make a linear bearing on a, I'm just going to make it for an 8mm rod. I've actually already made one for my new printer. I don't know if it's the final design or not yet, but it's going to have 12mm rods. But today I'm just going to start out and show you that. But first I'm going to change the color scheme back to the default one, because this one might be a little bit difficult for some people to understand. Yeah, so go back to normal here. I actually changed it to make it easier for me to see everything. But the default mode is easiest for most people. Anyway, let's get started on this. And so the first thing I like to do is, when I'm making an object, is basically making a make the object first by itself. So we want to go 8x8 by, let's just make it 100. It's actually probably going to be 200. Just make it 200. And basically that's the axis that we want to make. And go into orthographic mode. On my screen keys too. And so first thing I want to do is basically make an example of one of the bearings. And just some bearings that I got off of eBay. Actually, I haven't got them yet. I'm just waiting for them. But the size that they are 8mm by 4mm with a 3mm hole in the center. We really don't need to have the hole in the center now. But I'm a bit confused what's going on here. Oh, it's in orthographic mode. That's why it looks so weird. Okay. It's just looking really weird there for a little bit. So with 8mm, from the center of the rod, it's going to be 4mm here. And for the center of the bearing, it's also going to be 4mm there. So that we want to have it right on the edge there. But for most everybody's printer is going to be different. Mine prints the filament a little bit out, so I'm going to actually move that out by about a 1/4 of a millimeter there. So then it becomes, there's a little space there, but when it prints and you put everything together, it will have the correct dimensions there. And so to get this evenly spaced around it, I'm just going to set the origin and just make it to the 3D cursor. That way this object's middle is in the 3D cursor. I'm actually going to make the bearing have 3 different sides, so I'm going to duplicate it, rotate it around 120 degrees. So 360 divided by 3 is 120. And just do that again. Oh, I pressed Z that time. So actually I'm going to show you another trick here real quick before I do this. I'm going to just delete that. I'm going to duplicate it, rotate it 120. If you press Ctrl-R, it should repeat it. Oh, Shift-R. Shift-R basically repeats the last move that you did. So it rotated it for me up there instead of rotating it again. I hardly ever use that. It's just one of the features that's there. It's the Shift-R and that repeats the last move that you did. Anyway, so we got that. So we got those where we want them. I'm going to set the origin back to their middles. With a perfectly symmetrical object, you can use origin of geometry or center of mass. It doesn't matter for either one. And so I'm basically just making the specific copies of the actual objects that I'm going to be using. And they're just basic shapes because we need to use those to have the negative aspects of what we're going to be taking out of the object that we're going to make. Basically, we're going to subtract these parts from it. And the next object I want to make is the outer part of the bearing. And typically I like to have it, that's about 2.5, about 3 millimeters on the edge. I like to have about 3 millimeters all the way around. And so that's good. So I want to have it about 50 millimeters high. And let's just make this an even number. I like to make everything even numbers when I can. So if we look at it now, it's right in the middle. So we'll just use it for right in the middle right now. So the next thing I want to do is I'll just make another cylinder to show you. I made it so it has 66 vertices because we're dividing it by 3, so we want to have these evenly spaced around. And so we do that, we can basically have it evenly spaced. Let's go ahead and delete that. But I'm going to duplicate each one of these, actually just one of them, and I'm going to make the basically simulation of the bolts going through it. And for mine, I know that 3.25 seems to work pretty good for the bolt holes, just to make them a little bit bigger. And I plan on using 20 millimeter bolts, and we can set that origin to the 3D cursor again. Duplicate, rotate 120, duplicate, rotate 120. So we have it in the center of all of these. So basically they're lined up in the center, so that's where the bolt holes are going to be. And the next thing I want to do is, actually I'm going to extend these a little bit more, just so I can see the exact point where they cross over. Oop. Uh-oh, what did I do? Oh, size. I was trying to, don't know what I was doing there for a sec. Every now and then you'll hit wrong buttons, and that's normal. Ctrl-z is your friend. You just gotta use it when you need it. And so we got that. So they just, doesn't really matter how long these are right now. They just got to be long enough to go around the model. And so we go into edit mode. And so it looks like those 2 points, if you zoom in here, are equally spaced. We should have 2 more there and 2 more there. So what we can do now is size and press Shift-Z. So it'll only move them in on the X and Y, but we want to enable the proportional editing tool. That's what this is called, proportional editing. It makes it so that you can size things by using the scroll wheel. And so basically you can make a little even design here. And that seems to look good there. And my 3D printer just stopped working for a little bit. I don't know why it does that. It pauses every once in a while. Anyway, so we got that there. So So we have the basic design. And now what I want to do is I actually want to duplicate this, and I want to make it bigger. So we need to make it bigger this way because I want to put washers in between here in the part. So you probably want to add probably about 1 millimeter for each washer. So the y-axis, so we go over here, so make that 10. Oh, Ctrl-z. And it made it this way because when we rotated it, it still wasn't oriented correctly, because right now the y, it thinks the z-axis is the y. So what you can do to fix that is Ctrl-A and rotation, and it switches these around to where it is now, not where it was before, because it retains the rotational aspects when you rotate an object. So let's go ahead and change that now. So it's 4, so let's make it 6. And just for the tolerances for the 3D print, I'm going to make it 6.25. I like to give it a little bit of extra room just in case. So when we close this down, that's going to have the washers on there that the whole part's going to compress on, so that we'll have pressure on just the washers on the only part of the bearing that really matters. And we also want to have a little bit more room on all the sides. So we'll probably want to make it probably about 1 millimeter on each side, so we'll make that 10. So it's a little bit bigger there. And I'm actually going to go to the edit mode and side mode. Turn proportional editing off. Move that over to the center there. So that way, let's make it right there is good. Set origin to 3D cursor. And duplicate. Rotate 120. Shift D, duplicate, enter, rotate 120. So we now have the basic object there. And now we want to start adding these together. So click on one of them, union, find out which one this one is, the cylinder 10. And for some reason that's not wanting to work properly there. Okay, so another example of Blender messing up. It's saying difference when it's not. It's actually union is what this is. I don't know why it does it, but it does. Let's go ahead, apply. Now we can delete that original object. Then we have those two and kind of repeat the same thing. So we want to hit Boolean, union, cylinder 9 is the one we want. And that time it worked. Hit apply. I can delete the actual object. So all three of those together. So make sure it looks normal. Okay. Yeah, one thing I do all the time is if you right click on an object, you press G, grab it and move away. If you right click it, just undo. It's basically like an undo when you're doing something. So that looks good. And so actually going to join all these together. Ctrl-J joins different objects together. Normally you don't want to join them if they're touching. Actually, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to make these back down to 20 so they're not touching. If they are touching, typically you want to do the Boolean and add them together that way. So now they're not touching, I can add these together. And so we got that and that. And so I have this at 50 millimeters, so I want it to be kind of evenly spaced out. So this is 25, half of that would be 12.5, a little bit up to make it 10. So we want to move this Z 15. Move that up 15. And duplicate that. And we want this negative 15. Duplicate that. We want that negative 15. Now we can join those two together. And we can join those two together. And so we got those spaced where we need. And so what I want to do now is, before we get those taken out, I want to take out the middle section here. And duplicate this. And we want to make this probably about 11. Just so that it's not going to rub on the sides or anything. All you see is the bearings. Actually, just make it 10. That way that gives a little bit more room here. It's kind of a weak spot there, but should be strong enough if it's all together. And so we take this out. Whoa, wrong button. Boolean difference. It's always good to make sure you know what object you're using. So there's 6, apply. Delete that. We can actually get rid of that now. We don't need that anymore. So we have the hole in the center of the object now. Now we can do either one of these first. I like to do the more intricate object first. So let's go here, add Boolean difference, and this is cylinder 8. Apply. Can delete the original object now. So now we have the cutouts for the bearings. You put the bearings on in the inside. You slide them in and roll them in there. And now we just need to make holes for the bolts here. And Boolean difference. And cylinder 5. Apply, delete, and we see that looks good. These were just there. You can actually delete these, they don't need to be there, but kind of an example of how they're going to work. Oh, we had an error go on. I don't know what happened there. That's really weird. Apparently the function here didn't work on both of those. It left the imprint there, but it didn't actually make the hole. So what we can do, we can just select all these, go to top view, or front view, unselect these, unselect these. I guess we're going to have to do one at a time. Actually, probably gonna have to. Let me see something here. See, sometimes errors happen like this, and you gotta figure out what's going on with them. Okay, that's really weird. So that seemed to have worked. But now I have all this here. Ctrl-z. I want to see how far it'll let us back up here. Okay, so it let us back up quite a bit. And if you look, that's what happened. These are somehow got inverted, so they're not the way they're supposed to be. So I had to back up all the way here and go to edit mode, tab A to select them all, go into shading UV, recalculate, tab, and that malfunction. So let's see here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to completely redo this entire setup here because that did not work properly. Let's start over with one of these. Zoom in on it. Excuse me. Duplicate it. What do we have? Oh, we needed to rotate it the proper way. 6.25, 10 by 10. Just going to move it in a little bit now. So we just needed enough to go into the middle part. Okay. So, oh, we need to set the origin back to the center. Duplicate, rotate 120, duplicate, rotate 120. Try to add these together again. Cylinder 6, ply, I guess that's 7, yep. Cylinder 7, ply, and those look like they're normal. Let's just bring them out and see for sure. Okay, those look a lot better. So what happened was when I added them together, one of them got inverted somehow. I knew it looked a little bit different, but sometimes that happens and it's okay. So let's go ahead and move this to 15. Duplicate it and it's negative 15. Select both of them, join them together. Those are already joined together. Let's try this again here. And these are now cylinder 0. Apply. These are cylinder 5. Okay, so all three of them there now. Good, okay. So that time it worked. But every now and then you run into little quirks that don't quite work right, and Ctrl-z, you just gotta use it a lot, and you'll eventually get to where you need to be. Join all these together. These actually aren't needed anymore, but just as an example, this is the simulation of the bearings. This is kind of where they'll go. So they'll be kind of right there. Go into perspective mode. You can see that they'll go like that, and they'll right along the rail on perfect axis. And you can bolt them in on all three sides with a 20mm M3 bolt with a nut, and it'll hold them in with a couple of washers. And there's enough room in the middle where you can add whatever you need. Say you want to go ahead and get rid of the actual bearings there. We don't need those anymore. Rotate -30, and let's say we wanted to make this bearing for one of the rods on the side for the x-axis or the y-axis or something. So create a cylinder, rotate Y 90. Let's make this 8 by 8 by let's just do 60. Let's make it long enough. Go outside of the screen a little bit. Oh, it's already in. So we want to have it there. It's basically will be lined up that way. So in order to make a side for that, I only want that about an inch or so. And so what we need to do is make it so that it connects everywhere. So that way when you look at it, it's all the way connected to the object everywhere. And you can see in here it's on the inside of it. It's getting close to that edge, but it's not going to bother it at all. And you won't see it on the inside anywhere. It'll just be connected perfect there. Right in the middle, because we created it at the center. That's where the center is. We just moved everything from the center. 15 and 15 negative. So this is right in the middle. It's going to be right in the middle of the bearing. And what I like to do to use for measurements is just make a random cube and kind of size it out here. And this is no specific size, but let's make it 15. If you can get really specific, you can move in. Zoom in as far as you want need to. It'll only let you go so far, so it's all the way zoomed in. Lined up pretty close there. So now we can go into this and move this over. Zoom in some more. Zoom in some more. And it's right on the dot, so that's 15 millimeters of room there. And we want to have this, typically I make it slightly bigger, so 8.3. So that way when you put the rod in there, because the printing error, there's usually that much overrun on my printer anyway. So at 8.3, 8.3, it makes it that much more room for it. So first we can add this cube, it's cylinder 1. So that adds it to it. I can delete the original object, so it's added in there now. I can take this main object and cylinder, delete that, delete the cube because we don't need that anymore. So that we have a linear bearing that is ready to go for the XY, or you can even use this on the Z axis if you really wanted to. You can put this pretty much wherever you want. You can put it right there, like I have it here. I just have it this way so that way most of the weight is being on this bearing that's in the very top. These two just keep it straight, so that's why I have it oriented this way. That's the basics for a simple linear bearing that so far should work pretty good. I haven't used them yet, but this is just a design that I'm building for my new printer, and this is basically all there is to it. And that's it for today, and see you next week.